Good afternoon, everyone. Mr. President, it is a high honor and a distinct privilege to welcome you to the United States Capitol for our Friends of Ireland Luncheon. We are saddened that the Taoiseach could not be here, as Taoiseachs of Ireland have been the traditional participation in this lunch over the years. But we know that he is with us in spirit, and we send him bicameral and bipartisan greetings. Leader McCarthy is here, and from the Senate, Leader McCarthy, and from the Senate, Pat Leahy, among others, but he is our senior member. His mother's Italian, his father's Irish, so he shows up at everything. Okay, so here's what we gathered to participate. This is a cherished occasion for us. It's a tradition that was started by Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan when Ronald Reagan was president. In the first year, it was just the president and the speaker, as it is now. But in the years that followed, the Taoiseach was an important special guest. And you might be interested to know, Mr. President, that when Tip O'Neill had the first lunch, he had invited 16 members, 12 of them from Massachusetts.
Next year I got invited.
Then you came in the next year, okay. The next year, you were proudly joined by Taoiseach Garrett Fitzgerald, and each year since, again, that has been how we have celebrated the Feast of St. Patrick. We're grateful to the Friends of Ireland Caucus, led by co-chair Richie Neal. Where are we, Richie? Mike Kelly. Where's Pat? David Joyce. Where's David? David Joyce. Thank you. Again, bipartisan, bicameral. This we're especially grateful to be celebrating the Feast of St. Patrick with an Irish American President of the United States. Between our two nations are very strong, as you know, and even though the Speaker of the House is not Irish, Italian-American, I don't have Irish grandparents, but I do have Irish grandchildren. Sean, Ryan, and Liam. And again, they are just an example of the millions of bonds between our two countries of Irish Americans. And that future of our country is strengthened by America's, if you talk about the firm commitment to our future, it's enhanced by Irish Americans. The Irish Americans have fought in the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, have built our country in so many ways. I don't need to go into, you all know it, it's the stories of your life, and always to make a peaceful, beautiful future for America. I do want to say that in our shared history, peace has been a focal point. And last night I mentioned the Good Friday Accords as a part of peace in our time. I spoke about it last night because I had the privilege of being on a number of Codels to Ireland, to Northern Ireland as well. And many of us who visit Northern Ireland in the 90s saw at the border tanks, soldiers, Union Jacks, barbed wire, and the rest. And those of us who went recently to observe the anniversary of the Good Friday Accords saw a completely different situation at the border. Just a yellow line turning into a white line, making the distinction between Northern and Southern, and Northern Ireland and Ireland. What was interesting, Mr. President, at that time, the speaker at Stormont, he gave a big reception for us, all children, high school age children. And two of them spoke, one Catholic, one Protestant. And they both had the same message. They said that they who had never known conflict they made it clear they weren't going back. Nearly 2 generations of children living in peace. Again, we're sorry that Taoiseach could not be with us today. I commended him last night, and I just want to say, if he were here, what I said last night. I had the privilege of giving him, and the distinguished ambassador accepted on his part and gave his rousing speech. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. And the British ambassador is here as well. Hi, Carly. And the Irish ambassador. I said at the time of the Taoiseach that the world has been awed by his handling of the pandemic because he'd had a lifetime of leadership in terms of public health. His handling of the economy of Ireland, especially during the difficult times of Brexit, his reinvigoration of the government focus on housing and healthcare being a focus in his public life, and his unyielding belief in the power of education for the Irish children. And we saluted him for Ireland's very important role in promoting peace in Ukraine. Peace in Ukraine. Now, in the spirit of peace and our nation's longtime partnership, let us hear a blessing offered by Right Reverend Thomas O'Connor of Our Lady of Glastonbury Abbey in Hickam, Massachusetts. Is that your parish?
Everything's my parish.
Reverend O'Connor. Reverend O'Connor.
Good afternoon. Let us pray. O awesome God, we come here today to commemorate St. Patrick, who worked to unite and reconcile people, the same mission which all leaders of nations are charged with. St. Patrick is remembered for his simplicity and pastoral care, for his humble trust in God, and for his fearless preaching of the gospel to those who had enslaved him in his youth. He saw a future of Ireland and the care of its people as a core of his mission. He was committed to the growth of people by building community, by teaching the people about Christian faith, and by listening to God. Like Patrick, we of Irish ancestry have been blessed with a captivating culture which speaks of who we are and what makes us Irish. Like an exquisite landscape imbued with 40 shades of green. Like Irish soda bread and the endless cups of tea. Like a Cayley celebration of storytelling, singing, music, and the beat of the bow run, and Irish step dancing, and the presence of Guinness and Jameson are only an Irish jig away. Like the gift of the gab present in the Irish and many politicians, present company is no exception. Regardless if you have kissed the Blarney Stone or not. Like the gift of poetry, literature, mystics, and myth. And also like the beautiful concept of Anam Cara, soul friends, which our two nations have become over the years in a strong bond of hope, unity, and trust. God, we ask your blessing upon all those who are gathered here, upon this food we are about to partake, of those who have prepared it and will serve it. We ask your blessing also on those who have less than we do, especially the children of our nations, going to bed hungry tonight. And dear God, we are particularly mindful of the exiled people of the Ukraine, who are in need of hope and peace, healing, and safe passage. We ask all these in the name of the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Amen.
Do you think Father has kissed the Barney Stone? Hey, hey, hey. Oh, no, he hasn't even been to Ireland yet. Well, Father, I've been to Ireland. I've spoken to the Doyle. That's a big honor, yes, to talk about the children. And when Ronald Reagan came to speak at that first luncheon, he talked about the children. He said America has been blessed by her Irish children. And one of those Irish children is now the President of the United States. My wish for all of you is that you could have been there last night, and well, many of you were, to hear the President take pride in his Irish American heritage. He made us cry almost. He made us laugh in our hearts, and he made us think. He made us think about what America is and what the Irish community means to our great country. And we could see how this great president came to be as a person who understands the beautiful diversity of our country. As I've said, because he respects his own heritage, he understands how we respect our own heritage as well. And he understands the dignity and worth of all people because his Irish heritage, in his case, was accompanied by a deep Catholic faith. He talks about his mother and father quite a bit, and don't keep the faith, spread the faith, right? That's your mom. That's your mom. So again, I think of another Irish president when I think of President Biden, and I've told him this. When I was young, I was in school, and I attended the Kennedy inaugurations. Many of you have heard me say this. And everybody in the world, practically, but certainly in our country ever since, knows what President Kennedy said about ask not to citizens of America, ask not what America can do for you. You know that whole sentence. But the very next sentence, and I say this to the president, the very next sentence, President Kennedy made this statement thinking of Joe Biden. To the citizens, to the people of the world, ask not what America can do for you, but what we can do working together for the freedom of mankind. And that is exactly what our president is doing, working together with respect for everyone, other countries in the rest, not in any condescending way or anything, but in a respectful collaboration. That sentence was made for you, Mr. President, at this time. When we were, many of us, in Munich to the security conference, we heard leaders of countries and foreign ministers, defense ministers, but heads of state, right? You were shaking your head, say, thank you for your president, for bringing us together, for reinforcing the transatlantic alliance, and then even beyond that, and for helping us work together to help the people of Ukraine in a way that is unifying and not dictating. And so, again, with great pride, it's my pleasure to bring to one of America's children that God has blessed us with, the President of the United States.
Thank you very much, Nancy. That's very kind. Thank you. Thanks. Father, before I begin, bless me, Father, for I'm about to sin. Well, I just want you to know, I may be Irish, but I'm not stupid. I married Dominic Giacoppa's daughter. Okay? Look, thank you very much, Nancy, for that very gracious and very over-the-top introduction. I appreciate it very much. You know, I just got off on the way up, before I came up here, I was on the Zoom, as we say, with the Taoiseach for about 45 minutes. And he's looking well, he feels well. He's tested positive, but he feels well. It looks good, and he wanted to, I know the ambassador's here to bring his regards, but he's really sorry he can't be here. And he was looking forward to it, as was his wife. You know, the good spirits and feelings as well that exist on St. Patrick's Day seems to be one of those few times, and not so I would say few. We should have more times like this where Democrats and Republicans get together and we actually not only agree on one thing, but we remind ourselves we actually like each other. And it's a useful thing. And you know, Yeats wrote, and I quote, "Talent perceives differences, genius unity." Talents perceives differences, genius unity. And, you know, I think today we can add a fifth item to at least my unity agenda, and that's support of our relationship between Ireland and the United States, which is taking on an even more intense and cooperative form than it ever has because of Ireland's neutrality. On this issue, it brings together Speaker Pelosi, Leader McCarthy, Richie Neal, who is Irish, as we say where I come from belt buckle to shoe sole, and the leaders of both our parties and all the friends of Ireland. You know, I'm the proud son of Catherine Eugenia Finnegan Biden, and like so many Americans of Irish heritage, I love Ireland, and I was raised in a circumstance where you would have thought my whole family, they came in 1844 and 1845, but you'd think they'd all lived in Ireland the last 60 years, previous 60 years. There's, as I was talking to Taoiseach today, the Irish on St. Patrick's Day think that Irish Americans think they're more Irish than the Irish, and but that's kind of how I was raised. Like so many Americans of Irish heritage, like other people of other heritage as well, it was imbued in me to be proud of my heritage, and you know, the pride that was passed down generations in our family, even though they've been here since the mid-1800s. And it was just part of the air we breathed, especially up in Scranton, and where we lived with near my grandpa. My grandfather, Ambrose Finnegan, used to say, and I mean this, he'd say, "Joey, if you're lucky enough to be Irish, you're lucky enough." Every time something bad happened, I go, I'm not sure. Anyway, but because being an Irish family, family was everything. My dad's expression was family is the beginning, the middle, and the end, and he meant it. But you know, the faith we share with one another and the resilience that we've all gone through, both in America and in Ireland, you know, are ones that we've been knocked down sometimes, just knocked flat in our back. And my mom's expression for real was, "Joey, get up. Just get up. Get up." It's a simple proposition. It was sort of the Irish of it. You just get up, no matter what. Dust yourself off and move. We're not the only culture that has that view, but it was imbued in my family. And the other one was that, and I mean this sincerely, my dad is, no one is better than you, and you're no better than anyone else. Not a joke. No one is better than you, but you're no better than anyone else. And it's real. It's real. Because we were taught never, as my mother would say, never bow, never bend, never yield. But the truth of the matter was that in the days when my parents and grandparents were growing up in this cold country of Scranton, being Irish was less than a badge of honor. My great-grandfather blew it on my grandmother Finnegan's maiden name, was only the second Catholic ever elected to the Senate in the state of Pennsylvania, and that was 1907. Only the second one. The first one was in, I think, 1838 or 1840. The point was that, like many cultures, like many folks, where you came from was either viewed as an asset or a liability. And but the point is that everything that we were taught, and I'm sure all of you of Irish background and other backgrounds as well, were taught that it's all about striving for a better future, that you can do better, just simply do better, and and you can do it while you cherish the past. Now you don't have to forget the past or disassociate yourself from it, but cherish it. These are the values of immigrants, not only from Ireland, but from like my great-great-grandparents when they were brought here, brought themselves to the United States. But today it's only part of what it means to be Irish. There's an indelible part of it that is American, because the values are the same, in my view. The values built into our Constitution. That we are I heard me say last night, I think we're the most unique country in the history of the world. We're the only country based upon organizationally, not geography, not ethnicity, not race, not religion, but on a notion, an idea, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty. I mean, that's the basis of why we formed this country. No other country has ever been based on a notion like that. They've incorporated those notions, but the basis for their organization has been their ethnicity, their religion, their geography, whatever, but not here. And I know I say it, and many of you say it, and I think people wonder whether we really mean it. I really think the source of our strength is our diversity. The source of our strength is our diversity. And, the values that immigrants from Ireland brought, but as I said, they're not only Irish values, they're values, I think, of the vast majority of immigrants who come to the United States. And I'm proud to say that the bond between Ireland and the United States, by the way, has grown deeper and stronger over the years, for real. And we've navigated a once-in-a-century pandemic together. We've grieved the loss of too many people in both our countries. And we worked to rebuild our economies and taken on the challenge of renewing and strengthening our democracy. Because, again, I apologize for repeating myself, but I know many of you heard me say, I think we're at an inflection point in history. I think, and I mean that sincerely, it occurs every several generations. I think we're in a genuine struggle between autocracies and democracies, and whether or not democracies can be sustained. And I'm going to be speaking to President Xi tomorrow, and he'll remind me that I told him, he remembers every damn thing I've said, unfortunately. But all kidding aside, we talked about the idea, he does not believe democracies can be sustained in the 21st century. Because things move so rapidly, technology is changing so much, democracies don't have time to arrive at consensus. That's why autocracies will succeed. Well, and now, you have Ireland stepping up, not only in terms of their relationship with us, but, the Good Friday agreements, build on the political and economic progress that we've made together. And I know some criticize me, but I've had a good relationship with the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Boris. We always kid each other when we see each other, but the point is that I've made it clear that I don't think I just speak for myself. The Good Friday agreements are firmly supported here in the United States, and we insist that it occur. They can be maintained. Because it's not too hard. The people of Northern Ireland have made significant changes as well. There's movement, as you've mentioned, the young kids you talked about, Protestant and Catholic. talking how they've never known anything but being able to get along. I remember the first time on my parents' 50th wedding anniversary, my brothers and sister, we got together and and we can work something out for you, Father, we gave my parents a trip to Ireland. But it coincided, I was going over the Stormont talks. And so they said, you take him, Joey. But the point is that it was a bit of an epiphany for my parents. They thought to hear all the stories from their ancestors about this, that, and the other thing, some of it apocryphal, some of it real. But it was really amazing. But when we took them to the north, it was interesting. We went up to the Stormont, and anyway, it was an interesting thing to watch the look on my mother's face and my father's face as we toured Ireland, to see both the things that they had heard that were consistent with what because you never know whether there's exaggeration about, well, when this happened and that happened. But they came back more hopeful than they had ever been, as opposed to, and that was a while ago. My generic point is that, now you have Ireland and Great Britain and the Republic standing together against a murderous dictator, a pure thug who is waging an immoral war against the people of Ukraine. And by the way, the Republic is paying a big price for this, a big number for supporting the strategy, for supporting the sanctions, including aircraft, a whole range of things. It's not a minor contribution they're making to this effort. It's significant. Ireland and the United States are working together for the first time now. They're on the United Nations Security Council. Ireland's a part of the Security Council now, and the European Union. And Putin is paying a big price for his aggression, and they are part of the reason the cost is going so high. That's a little bit, everybody talks about Germany having stepped up and changed their notions about being more leaning forward, and they have. Well, so is Ireland. So is Ireland, a neutral country. Ireland has stepped up and taking a hit for what they're doing. And you look, ladies and gentlemen, the relationship between Ireland and the United States is a dynamic and I think essential partnership that as much as it has ever been. And, it's sustained and strengthened by the Friends of Ireland in this room and all across the country. And, the connections that link our people stretch back through history, and they well forward, I believe, for the future. We share a common goal, a future of greater peace, greater hope, greater security, and a greater sense of who we are as a country. And my mother's expression, gotten from her grandfather, was, as long as you're alive, you have an obligation to strive, and you're not dead till you've seen the face of God. That's what I think of when I think of Ireland. All the troubles they've been through, they have never, ever, ever quit. Never, ever, ever, ever quit. Not once. They've gotten up. And now they're beginning to at least have the benefits of all the hard work and labor they've engaged in. And to becoming a real actor, Mr. Ambassador, on the world stage and at the United Nations. And so I want to thank you, Mr. Ambassador, and I thank the Taoiseach today. And I should probably tell you that my mother, when we went to Ireland, and we were in the South, and my father was a real gentleman, and his greatest regret was he never had a college education. But if any one of you were coming back to Delaware with me, and my dad were around or retired, and I didn't call him to tell him I was bringing you over to introduce him, so he had a chance to put on a coat and a tie, because he would only see you that way. That was my dad. And as we were going to Ireland, Fitzgerald was the Taoiseach, and we walked in to have a picture taken. And my dad had this brand new blazer that had a patch on it. my brother-in-law, Jack Owens, who's Irish from, like you, Neil, and it was this patch, this crest, and it's Latin written on it. And I never took the time to look at it, although I had to take 4 years of Latin, three years of Latin in the Catholic high school I went to. And the Taoiseach were having a picture taken. He said, "Oh, Mr. Biden," he said, "I agree." And what it said in Latin was, "Don't let the bastards get you down." Well, we can't let them get us down. We can't let them get us down. Thank you for allowing me to come back home, come up here and speak, and thank you, Nancy, for the nice compliments.
As the president has to make a clean exit to go back to work, I wanted all of us to lift our glass to toast the president on this St. Patrick's Day. Mr. President, this is a toast that I learned from my grandchildren. I've said it to our colleagues here before, and it goes like this. It's an Irish toast. Sing as if no one can hear you. Dance as if no one can see you. Love as if you've never loved before, and live as if heaven is on earth. So when I said to them, is that a toast that is a tradition in the Keneally family? They say, no, that's a sign that is in the Shannon Airport. To the President, thank you, Mr. President. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Well, my grandmother had one. He said, "May those who love us, and those who don't, may they turn their ankles so we know they're coming by their limp."
President.